Okay, so we're ready to go.
Yeah. First off, is there anything like, because like I kind of want to talk about like any facet of life in like your life specifically.
Okay.
So like, is there
So
anything you don't want to talk about?
no,
Okay, cool.
no. You know, Grammy can always filter out what she doesn't like because
Sure.
she's more sensitive. But we can have the unexpurgated edition and the one that Grammy's more comfortable with.
No, it's more so just like emotional stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
I'm okay with everything.
Cool. Then let's start at like the very beginning. Someone asked in your birthday invitations. I forgot to write them down of who asked what, but
It doesn't matter.
yeah.
But do you have the
You
questions?
hear that, everybody watching this? He doesn't care. Yeah. So somebody asked, "What is your earliest memory?"
What is my earliest memory? Well, you.
Now, are you going to be on?
Honey, he's recording right now. He's recording right now.
We can go again.
We can start over again, but do you want to be you want to talk from the background, or do you want to let him record without you?
Probably go in the other room in just a minute.
You can't. Okay, we can start over. Should I say hi, Spencer, and start the conversation?
If you want to do.
Okay, tell me when to start.
Yeah, you are good.
Hi, Spencer. I'm glad that we're going to do this together. I was looking forward to it for a while, and I'm glad that we're going to do it. You had some questions.
Yes. Actually, here. So this is going to be the main camera. I know I'm sitting here, but would it actually help if I'm sitting over there?
Doesn't matter.
Okay. So that's going to be the main camera, and then this one I cut to.
Okay.
Times. So, okay. Yeah. So somebody asked, "What is your earliest memory?"
Well, my earliest memory. It's hard to distinguish between what I actually remember and what I have been told by others happened when I was very little. So I think this is a memory, but I'm not sure. When I was very little, I was born in August, so winter in Michigan was just a month or two later. Mom put me on the porch when I was just a baby in the winter, all bundled up in a buggy. I guess you call them perambulators now. And she had me all bundled up and a little cap on. And the only thing that was sticking out of my scarf and everything was my nose. And she said she would come out and see how I was, and I was happy, but my nose was really red because the temperature then was around zero, sometimes below zero in those days. And that was before all the warming of the planet that we've had experienced. So it doesn't get below zero much anymore in Michigan. So anyway, that's a very early memory that I was out there enjoying myself in the cold, cold weather, but I was really bundled up real good. So that's about all I can recall from real young, less than a year.
Do you remember this house?
Yeah, that's the house that my family moved to when I was about a year or so old. And that's my car behind my dad's car. And that's a 34 Chevy parked there in the driveway. And that Chevy was born the same year I was. I was born in 1934. So it was, I got it, my brother Jim bought that for me when I was probably 16 and just got a license. And so it was probably 16 years old at the time. quite a car, and a lot of memories from that. I used to pick up a bunch of other seminarians that were going to school with me. I think there were 3 or 4 of us, and I would drive them to school, and they would help me pay for the gas. I got oil free from a friend of my brother Jim's. He used to drain oil from cars and give them an oil change, and so the drain oil I used in my car, and had a lot of oil leaks, so I didn't mind the loss because didn't pay anything for the oil. I used oil. One of the problems, though, the oil would leak from the engine and get it into the brake system somehow, and then it would, when you have oil on your brake pads, the problem would be that as hard as you pushed on the brake pedal, it would still be sliding because they were the pads were soaked with oil. And that 34 Chevy had what would be called mechanical brakes. They didn't have hydraulic brakes yet at that time in 1934. So I would press as hard as I could, and it would slow down the car. It wouldn't stop right away. And I remember one time I pressed as hard as I could to stop on the way to school that one day with a car full of kids. And it just slowed down and went right through the red light. Fortunately, no cars were coming the other way. And so when it finally stopped, we were halfway out of the red light, and so I just drove off. That was quite a car.
I'm talking about school and stuff. We have this old picture. I think it's a class photo.
Yeah, it's a class photo when we were in college and high school.
Do you see
In the
yourself there?
seminary. Yeah, I'm here someplace. Let's see.
I want to know if you can find yourself.
Yeah, here I am.
Yeah.
I got a sweater with something on it, and I can't remember what it is. It's a fish or what? Yeah. I don't know if this camera.
Oh yeah. No, it'll pick it up, and then I have the pictures that I'm gonna.
Okay, good.
And they're talking about a car and picking people up. We have this picture that says 2 hitchhikers on their way to California. Are these people you picked up? 1971, July.
Well, we were probably the
1971.
hitchhikers. We were probably the hitchhikers because that doesn't look like a car I would have been driving.
I didn't recognize those people. They didn't look like me. So I was
2
curious if you were.
hitchhikers on the way to California. Well,
I was curious if you were picking them
I
up.
can't
or
tell
staying.
either who they are.
Huh.
I don't think either one of them was me.
One person I don't know who it is. It says to Joe Mountain.
Yeah, that's Tetsuji Aoyama. Tetsuji Aoyama was a Japanese student at the University of Michigan that I got to know really well. Tetsuji was studying international relations or something at the University of Michigan. He was hoping to work as a interpreter for the UN, and that was his goal. He was a very nice young man. I've wondered many times over the years what's happening with him, if he's working in international relations in some way in Japan, or just what his story is. I guess
same
nowadays I could check on the internet if I run his name. And that's Tetsuji, and another fellow, if his name is Bernardin is his last name.
Me and my mom were very curious who these 2 other men in very small bathing suits, very close to you are.
I
I'm most curious about that picture.
Yeah. There were 3 guys that I knew when I was living at the at the hospital, the Catholic Hospital in Ann Arbor, for a summer, driving the nurses from where the nurses were staying, student nurses, to the university in Ypsilanti and back to Ann Arbor. So, and those were guys I got to know. Paul Bernardin became a Dominican priest, and Tetsuji, like I mentioned, wanted to go into international work, and the other one is me, maybe.
I think that one was you. We have this picture.
Can you show these pictures to people?
Yeah.
The camera? Okay. Okay, this is my family. Jimmy, the tallest one, with the patch over his eye. Sally's next to him. Then me, then Henry, then Mary.
There's one other person that just says question mark on the back.
Yeah,
we don't know.
I think that. Yeah, there's a female and Bob. It could be Bob Winkle. I don't know. But the other male. Yeah, that's a good picture, and you can make that visible on the screen.
Yeah,
Great.
I scanned all of them, so in the final product we'll have these popping up. Talking about your family, a lot of descendants of all your siblings.
What's interesting in my family, except for me and my brother Henry, every one of my siblings had 6 kids, except Jimmy had 12.
Oh, wow.
And he adopted 2. They had 10, and then they adopted 2 more.
A lot of them, I put a thing out for people to type in any questions they wanted to ask. And a majority of the questions were just any memories you had about your siblings. So we can run down the list.
Oh, okay. Start with Henry's the oldest.
Yeah.
Henry was very popular with the girls in high school. All the really pretty girls were his friends, and he would guys would say, put in a good word for me with so and so, because he wanted to date her, and she was very pretty, and he didn't know if she would go with him or not. And so Henry went to an all boys high school like I did for the first 2 years at De La Salle High School, and so the girls that he knew through Sally, his younger sister, really liked Henry, and Henry would introduce him to all kind of guys, whoever they wanted to meet. So he was a kind of a go-between, and very popular with the girls and with the guys because of that. And so he really was popular with the girls. I think he related to them in a way that was non-threatening, even though he was a young man, because he didn't identify at that time. I don't know what his thinking was. He was probably in the midst of trying to decide his own gender, but he eventually was very clear that he was homosexual, and so he was non-threatening to boys or girls in terms of this. He wasn't competitive with the boys for the pretty girls. He was just real good friends with them, something like one of the girls, as it were. And so he became a great contact for the guys that are trying to get to know and get close to any of the girls that they found pretty. And as I say, he had contact with girls through his sister Sally, who was just a couple years younger than him.
Talking about Sally, what comes to mind when you think of her?
Sally was kind of the glamorous one of the family. Mary was plain, very attractive, very friendly, great personality, but wasn't flashy like Sally was. Sally decided she wanted to go to the convent and joined the Marian Sisters, which is a missionary group, and she really enjoyed being with them, and was, I think, a year or maybe even 2 years with them. But she had migraine headaches most of her life, and the convent decided that it would be hard for her to be a missionary nun if she had these migraine headaches. They would be pretty well difficult and a problem for the community that she'd be part of, because they would need treatment of some kind, and she was very disabled when she would have the migraine headaches for a couple of days at a time, frequently during the year. So she left the convent after a few years, and when she did, the boy that she liked a lot, the same year, I believe it was the same year, or maybe a year or so earlier, he went to the seminary, Jerry Clancy, and so she left the convent and returned home. And I don't know how soon after that he left the seminary, and so they started dating, and eventually they married and had their 6 kids. And that was a very adventuresome life Sally had, because her husband, Jerry, became an alcoholic and didn't want treatment. So they worked out an agreement, and she moved with her 6 kids to Ireland for a year or two. I don't know how many years. I was pretty young at the time. And while she was in Dublin, they moved to Dublin, Ireland. She became involved with the Dublin theater and worked in theater in various ways, and became part of the theater culture, and really enjoyed that. She had a hard time with the dreary winters, or I don't know if winters or summers, but the dreary raining seasons in Dublin were pretty depressing for her. And so she told me one time that when the weather is lousy, she just feels too bad to even do anything to take care of her family in her house, and it's just a miserable time. And when it's not rainy and when it's sunshine, then she feels like getting out and doing something fun, taking the kids to a picnic or something. And so neither good weather or bad weather did she feel like doing any housework. So she enjoyed the theater in Dublin. That's Sally.
Yeah.
By the way,
yeah.
she eventually, Jerry did eventually go to AA and recovered from alcoholism. She returned to Michigan with all the kids, and they lived together for the rest of their lives.
So next, I want to ask about if there were any specifically funny memories about Jimmy.
Uh, Tim was a great brother. He was my favorite big brother. All three, uh, Henry, Paul, and Jimmy, were older than me. Jim was the closest age, but since there were two brothers, two sisters between Jim and I, we were probably 4 years or so apart in age. But he was a great big brother. He taught me how to use the jigsaw that the family had, and use that for various little projects. He taught me to make airplanes that could fly, and that was a very elaborate program because it involved making a frame for the airplane out of balsa wood pieces, very small, uh, maybe a 16th of an inch square in dimension, and then they would be maybe a foot long, and we would make the body of the airplane with these pieces of balsa wood, and then we would cover it with a tissue that was very light, and you glue it with I can't remember what they called the glue, and so we'd make these airplanes and fly them. They would be powered by a propeller. You wind it backwards until the rubber band couldn't stretch anymore, and then you'd release it, usually moving it with both hands in the air, and it would fly with the rubber band unwinding and the filler powering the propeller. There were takeoff and landing planes sometimes, and we made some of those, flew them. Jim is the one that taught me how to do all that. He was really skilled in making airplanes, and so that was fun. I was close to Jim in that. Jim was a great friend to his buddies from high school and otherwise from other schools, and he was great friends with Sally's girlfriend. Sally and Jim were pretty much in the same grade. They were about a year apart in birth, and so they had the same group of friends, just Sally's girls and girlfriends and Jim's boyfriends were all, they called it the gang, and they hung out together, did a lot of things together. Great. And eventually Jim dated one of the girls from Sally's class, Doris Eschrick. And when Jim was, I'm going to say around 12, maybe 10, maybe 13, but around that age, he and one of his buddies, Ray Jackowitz, who lived over on the next block, they were playing with a bow and arrow, and Jim, my brother, and he decided to play with William Tell, and so you may know the story of William Tell. He was such a good archer that when he was challenged by someone, he had his son put an apple on his head and then shot an arrow right through the apple. And so they played that, and Jim had the apple on his head, and the apple and the arrow, play arrow set of some kind, hit his eye, and that was a terrible crisis for him. And rushed to the doctor, and the doctor could not save the vision in his eye, but was able to save the eye itself. And so Jim had this blank-looking eye for some time, and then when he was in high school, he decided it was too ugly and it was too much of a problem for him in terms of his friendship and so on. So he decided that he wanted to get a glass eye, and so they removed the eye, and he was given a glass eye sometime in high school. I'm not sure what grade he was in, and but the glass eye was very cold in the winter and very uncomfortable for him. So he, around that time, someone developed a plastic eye. So they tried that with him, and he had various difficulties with that. I remember one time he thought he had flushed it down the toilet accidentally, and so he went down to the basement to see if somehow the piping of the toilet would go there and he could get it out of the basement toilet. Well, that didn't work. And so he was very, very dismayed about that. So he got another plastic eye, and I guess he used the plastic eye pretty much through high school. And then later on, as an adult, he started using a patch because he just didn't think that he looked right with the plastic eye. And I think he used a patch pretty much the rest of his life. We have a really nice picture of him. I don't know if we can find it. He's on a horse, and he has the patch over his eye. He looked like a very handsome Westerner on his horse. He said the name of the horse was Comanche. Jim had a hard time with school. He didn't really do well in school, and he was very good with his hands and mechanical things.
Yeah, going back to that, would you say like him teaching you how to do the planes and stuff kind of like sparked your interest in like the beginning of like woodworking, clay making?
Yeah, it did. It got my first interest in woodworking, and I enjoyed that a lot. Made various things in wood over the years. So yeah, he got me interested in working with wood, making things on the jigsaw and airplanes and all kinds of things. Jim had difficulties with school, and so Mom and Dad decided that he should go to a Christian Brothers school up in Canada, where they thought in a boarding school he would do better. So he went there, but I don't think he stayed for a whole year. He took off. He was probably a junior in high school. Took off and went to Texas and worked down there, and then from there up to Washington. Worked in various areas. Worked in oil fields, I think, in Texas. Worked in canneries and developed skill in working with refrigeration and stuff. and became quite skillful. Welding was one of the things that he taught himself to do, and was very successful with it.
I also told we want to hear specifically again funny memories about Mary.
About Mary.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Or if you just
Mary,
what comes to
Mary,
mind?
yeah. Mary was in school when I was wanting to go to school as a little kid, maybe 4 years old, and so I was really interested in everything she learned at school. So she would come home and be a little teacher, and she would teach me what she was learning, teaching me to read and all that sort of thing. And we had a lot of time together with her, reading stories from her books that she was had in school, and so Mary was a special friend. She really would tell me every day. I'd be so anxious when she would come home from school to find out what she learned that day. And she would be my little teacher.
And Paul. What comes to mind when you think
Oh,
of Paul?
Paul was the adventurer of the family. Paul loved horses, and I remember in those days they used to a photographer would go with a pony through town, and the kids would get their picture taken on the pony, and that was a very common thing when I was a little kid. I was preschool at that time, and the story I heard, I was either not born yet or too little to be involved and know about it. But when the guy came, the photographer came through the area with the pony. Paul really liked the pony, so he talked to the guy and asked him if he could ride the pony from one house to the next. And the guy thought, yeah, that would be good if I have a little kid on the pony. That will be real easy to convince mothers that the pony's safe for their little boy to ride and get his picture taken. So Paul disappeared, and Mom and Dad tried to figure out where in the heck he was, because he was a small boy at the time. I don't know how old. And so someone said that they saw him on a pony. So they went through the neighborhood trying to find where the pony photographer went, and they eventually found him riding on the pony. But it was many hours looking for him before they found him. And Paul told me when I was a youngster that I wanted a horse, and he said, I'll get you a horse. And he never did get it when I was a little kid. And gradually, by the time I was ordained a priest, he said, well, I'll get you a horse now. And he was living out in the country and had a place for it. So he bought me a horse, and it was a small, not a large horse, but it was a riding horse. And I had the privilege of roping it and breaking it and riding it. I used the system that the Indians used, breaking a horse by riding in loose soil so that the horse could not get its footing to rear up or buck up and throw me off. And so I rode Carmen around in loose dirt several weeks until I finally broke her.
Right. I think this is much later than what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's you on a horse.
Yeah, this wasn't my horse. So when I went to Mexico to learn Spanish during the seminary, I bought a saddle down there, and brought it back on the airplane when they flew back home, and I used that saddle to ride my horse called Carmen. That was fun. That was Paul. Paul was a great adventurer, and he was a travel agent. He set up tours of Europe and so on, and even pilgrimages and that sort of thing. So when I was a young priest, he got me a free ride to Europe, so that I could be a part of the pilgrimage that he set up, and we put on cursillos, which is a kind of intensive retreat for men. We put up. I participated in one in Nazareth, and we tried to get one in what's that small country? I can't remember the name, but anyway, it was an island that was divided between I think England occupied half of the island, and the other half was some other country, and we tried to put on a cursillo there. Could not get permission, but I was on that island for a while, and it was a nice experience. Can't remember the name of the island. There's a lot of things I can't remember these days.
What do you think that is?
That's my dad when he was in the army. Henry Melton Jr. His father was Henry Melton Sr., and he was junior. And then when my son was Henry Melton Jr., he was Henry Melton II, and then my brother was Henry Melton III. This is my dad and me in our backyard.
What do you remember about your dad? What comes to mind when you think about him?
My dad pictured himself, I think, as a gentleman farmer. He would sit and watch the corn grow and the various things that had planted in the small, what we called victory garden. In those days, during the Second World War, people were encouraged to grow vegetables in their backyards as an effort to supply food when food was rationed and scarce because of the war. So he had a little victory garden in our yard, and he would grow his beans and corn and various things. And he would sit in his chair and watch them grow, as it were, relax, read the newspaper, and that was his farming. He made his living as a pharmaceutical chemist, which, well, my dad's story is an interesting one. His father grew up in Pineapple, Alabama, where Dad grew up most of his life. He lived on the plantation of his grandfather, who was a slave owner from after the Civil War until 1800, when he died. And my dad was born around 1891 or two, something like that. So he lived about 8 years on the plantation of his grandfather, and then the grandfather died. when he was about 8 years old. So he didn't. He lived out there on the farm and talks about uh, having a pet chicken, and then one day he couldn't find the chicken, and it was at the dinner table, and his mother said, "Well, we're serving the chicken now for dinner." And so he got up and left the table. He couldn't dare to think of eating his pet chicken, and he was really hurt by that. So he grew up there, and he went to the famous school that they had in Pineapple that was started by a uh, uh, very well educated professor who developed the school and made a great, it's a 2-story brick, brick building in Pineapple. And it's still standing. And he went to that school. And when he graduated, he went to college, I think in Pensacola, Florida, I'm not sure. And he was studying pre-med. He wanted to become a doctor. And there were several doctors that had graduated from his high school in Pineapple, Alabama. It was a very good school. And so he was planning to become a doctor. And then his dad died at 57, very young man. And so at that point, there was no financial resource for going to medical school. So he joined the army and became a medic in the army. They called him Doc, and he developed some skill in that kind of work, helping the doctors and doing what he could. And as you know, in the service, when there's a war going on, anyone that has any skill at all uses all of his skills to help soldiers recover from their injuries. So that was his service in the First World War. He was a medic. And when he came out of the service, he did not return to the South. And that's a very interesting fact. I'm not sure why, but I have some guesses about that. That he perhaps did not want to go back into the slave mentality of his family, the slave owning thing. So he discharged in Detroit and went to work at a drugstore, helping the druggist and eventually developing the skills of a druggist that didn't have the university programs that they have now for that. And he became a functioning a pharmacist. And that's where he met my mother and married her and decided to become a Catholic and so on. My dad told me one time that when he grew up in Pineapple, Alabama, he had never seen a Catholic, never. He said what he thought when he was a little kid is that Catholics had horns and tails. They were some kind of devils. And he didn't want to have anything to do with them. However, when he was in the army, his best friend was Catholic. Red Zettel was a very good friend of his. And he even dated a Catholic nurse when he was in France or Germany. So that's my dad. There's lots more stories about him, that I can tell you at some point.
Yeah, definitely. So he was like an inventor, right? He had
Yes,
invented a few things.
Well, let me tell you his story then. He worked with a pharmacist and became a pharmacist just by doing the work. And he was a very brilliant man, and he was able to learn what he needed to learn right there on the job. Uh, Later on, he went to work for uh, Park Davis, and another pharmaceutical company before that, C.E. Jameson, and he worked as a experimental chemist, and he developed various pharmaceutical products, like he developed a treatment for sore throat. I remember the bottle was a tall bottle, and it had a giraffe on it, and it said something like, "If you have a throat as long as a giraffe, this medicine will help your throat." And he also developed some toothpaste products and so on. And during for the army, he developed a system of a little tablet that could be lit on fire and used to boil water or something, so that soldiers could use it in areas where the water was not pure, and they could purify it by boiling it. Also, my father was informed of a problem that the Borden Milk Company had, and that is they were they had the problem that the kids were not getting the full benefit of their milk because it just was not didn't have all the nutrients they wanted. So they started adding vitamin D to the milk. But Borden said they had this problem that the vitamin D would stay with the cream because the cream would separate from the milk in the bottle and would come to the top. And the parents would often pour off the cream for their coffee. And so the kids were not getting the vitamin D that they needed. So, because the vitamin D would stay with the cream. So Dad figured out that if they homogenized the milk, then this cream wouldn't separate from the rest of the milk, from the skim milk.
Stop recording. Give me 1 second. I don't know why I did that. I guess it just caps it for minutes.
As I was saying, the Borden Company said we have a problem that we put vitamin D in the milk, but the parents are getting it in the cream for their coffee, and the kids are not getting the vitamin D that they need. And it was determined that vitamin D would help them to grow better. So Dad worked on this with a physician, and he did all the experimental work. And he decided that by forcing the mixed milk, if you mix a great quantity of milk so that the cream is not separated, just whipped together, then you forced the milk through very small orifices, holes, it would force the molecules of cream and milk to integrate in some way and stay together. And after you forced it through these small holes, it would not separate again. And that was called homogenization, making the milk everywhere the same. So they used to call it Homo-D milk, homogenized milk with vitamin D in it. And that way, the kids would get the vitamin D. And my dad used to say, see how tall the kids are growing now? That's because we're getting vitamin D. I don't know how accurate that is, but he was satisfied that this change would make a significant difference for kids growing up and having vitamin D instead of the parents having all the vitamin D in their cream.
Jumping off from that, some people were wanting to know from when you were born to now, living through like 90 years of inventions, like what's that been like, and like what's like been the greatest change? Sure, it's hard to do.
Well, that's a good question. Is the question recorded so I can just address it, or do I have to repeat? Okay. When I was a youngster, milk was delivered every day, or maybe it wasn't every day, but maybe a couple of days a week, by horse-drawn wagons. And that was in Detroit. So Detroit was very mobilized. It had more cars probably than any other city because they were all manufactured there. But in spite of that fact, milk was delivered by horse-drawn wagons. And I can remember the milkman getting off the horse-drawn wagon with his basket of maybe a dozen bottles of milk, deliver it to the one house, and then maybe the rest of it, maybe 3 or 4 bottles, to the house next to it. And then he would whistle to the horse or something, give him directions, and the horse would start walking, and he'd jump onto it while it's moving, while the cart is moving, and then stop at the next house and deliver milk there. So that was just routine. Also, the Sheenies would go down the alley with horse-drawn wagons. Those horses were very lean and very scrawny looking, and the Sheenies were usually black men, and obviously poor, and the rickety wagons they had were quite poor, and they would go down the alleys picking up anything that could be resold. People would just put their junk out that they want to get rid of in the alleys, and could be an old washing machine or any number of things that they discarded. And the genie would put it on his wagon. I remember they used to collect tinfoil. We called it tinfoil in those days. I don't know if it's the same as the foil we use nowadays or different. I think now it's made out of aluminum. It's called aluminum foil. But I don't know what that foil was. But we would make balls of it as kids, and then we would give it to the Sheen. Sometimes he even give us a few pennies for it. So he would apparently recycle that the tinfoil, and so we got to know the Sheenies, because whenever the Sheenie was coming, he would blow a horn and stop his horse and check the trash cans and see if there's anything that's recyclable that he could use, and he'd toss it on his wagon and move on. So we we always like to hear when the Sheenies come by, and we'd get ahead of them just in case there was something that we wanted. I remember one time I found some pipes from a gas stove that had it was shaped that kind of looked like it had some handles and stuff on it to control the gas, and it looked like I imagined it to be like a machine gun, so that was my machine gun. I grabbed that, and we played with that for some time. And I remember taking that next door and sitting in my buddy that lived next door, Donnie Ponzaroli, sitting in his garage, which had a hole in the cement in the garage. His dad didn't have a car parked there. His dad had died, and I guess the car was sold. His mother didn't drive, so they had an empty garage, and we would play in the garage and pretend that hole in the cement was our fireplace. And so we our fire pit, and we would sit around that hole in the cement and talk about being whatever we want to imagine us to be, soldiers or explorers, whatever. And I remember having that fake machine gun there with us. I like that. So changes, yeah, I don't see any horse-drawn vehicles on the streets anymore or in the alleys. In fact, they're removing alleys, both where they were. They have widened yards to remove the alleys in some places, and all the new structures in this area don't have alleys.
I remember the other day you were telling me the story about like the first time you saw a TV.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was 12 or maybe 14, quite young, and the word was that at the corner of Gratiot and our street, Rosemary, there was a new car sales place that had installed a TV, and they were having an open house, and everyone could come and see the TV and see their cars, and they hoped would sell some cars. So word was out that that people could go in and see a TV, and we had heard about them, but none of us had ever seen one. So we went down to Gratiot and Rosemary and went into the car sales place, and sure enough, there was a TV there. It was a round circle about maybe a big one would be the size of a what do you call those?
Oh, the frisbees.
Yeah, about the size of a frisbee, round like that. And so we went in, and sure enough, there was a TV there. And I don't know if it was Ed, I can't remember his last name, but he was a comedian that used to have a show.
Ed Sullivan.
Ed Sullivan, yeah. Ed Sullivan might have been on. He was one of the few people that would be on TV. And it would only be on during the day, then at night it would be like snowflakes all night long. So funny thing happened to me at that open house at the car sales place. I don't know if they were selling Buicks or what, but they had different hors d'oeuvres, and I saw this cracker. It looked like it had some black raspberry jam on it. So I grabbed one and took a bite of it. Oh my gosh. I ran for the bathroom and spit it out in the toilet. It was terrible. And I found out it was caviar. I thought it was black raspberries because it's just about that size. And it was awful. Never heard of it before and didn't know what the heck that was, but I sure wasn't going to eat it. So that was my introduction to TV. And then gradually after that, within a year, 2, 3 years, people started putting aerials up on their chimneys. And my dad, I said to my dad, well, should we get a TV? And he said, no, but we could get an aerial and stick it up there so everybody will think that we have one. If you want to keep up with the Joneses. He thought it was not a good thing to have TV, and he wasn't going to have it.
Switching gears to a much more important to recognize.
I wonder what that is. Does it say? Elizabeth Dupuy. Sadie Elizabeth Dupuy. This is my mom's baby picture.
Yeah. What comes to mind when you think about your mom?
Wow. We could spend a whole day on this. My mom was a marvelous person. She was a saint. She was a holy person. She loved God. She taught me to know and love God. I can remember I was very young, and she taught me to pray. And eventually, when I went to school, I learned Our Father and the Hail Mary and all that. In fact, I probably learned that at home when the family would say the rosary together. But she taught me to pray, ask God to help me to grow up healthy in mind and body, and to serve Him and love Him. And I can't remember the prayer I ever written down someplace. But I learned to talk to God and use my own words, and that's been valuable for me all my life. And she helped me to know that God was my Father, my Father in heaven, and that it was everyone's Father. And that has been, to me, an amazing thing, that He is actually my Father. He adopted me. He made me His son. And He loves me like a father loves his son. And I can spend hours meditating on that. That's a mind blower. The creator of the universe, creator of this huge, unmeasurable universe. It's so big. He chose me and loved me, just as He chose you and loves you and every single person He's ever created. So I learned that from my mother, and there's many other things I learned from her. I remember I'd be sitting around home bored because everyone else went to school and I was too little to go to school. And Mom would bring out this book that said, "What can I do now, Mom?" And it had various things, and she taught me how to make hand puppets out of potatoes. And, you cut a hole for your finger, and then you put eyes on it with what are those things that you stick, a spice that you stick in things. It would stick these.
Like skewers?
Was it?
Like skewers?
Yeah, something like that. But it's a spice. It's just
Cinnamon.
real small. Yeah, kind of like nutmeg or cinnamon or something. Anyway, so I learned how to make puppets. One day, I was bored, and she said, "Well, here's a bucket of water, and here's a paintbrush. Why don't you go down to the corner where the street isn't paved and has a whole bunch of stones? Why don't you go there and sit on the curb and paint some stones? See how they turn colors when you get them wet." Oh, okay. So I went down there with my bucket and the paintbrush and painted stones. that lasted for a while. Another thing that was fun to do when I was little was just to lay my back and look at the clouds and see how they change and move and stuff.
This is from, I think, a newspaper.
Pardon?
This is from, I think a newspaper. St. David's once again has abundant reason to rejoice. Another worker chosen from this parish is ready to help our Lord in the harvesting of souls for heaven. The young priest is Joseph Melton.
Oh, yeah, that's the parish bulletin probably. And that was me. Yeah.
Jumping off from
No,
your mom.
that was a great
teaching you about
adventure.
God.
Yeah.
Did you have a story about?
Well, when I was in Catholic school, the nuns would teach us about what a wonderful thing it is to be a priest and to be able to be a minister to people and to teach them about God and help people to know and love God and live right and so on. And I thought, oh, that's something good to do. Maybe I'd like to do that. And so I was open to that, but when it got to be in the 8th grade, that's when kids would decide to go to the seminary and start in the 9th grade of high school. The seminary in our town, Sacred Heart Seminary, started with 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. That was all part of the seminary. And then from there, they would go into the college, also at Sacred Heart. And then when they would graduate from the college, they would go to the major seminary, which in my time was built. It was called St. John's Provincial Seminary for the whole province of Michigan. So I thought hard about that. And other friends of mine went to the seminary in the 9th grade. And I thought, wait a minute, high school is when you start having dances and dating and stuff like that. I don't want to miss out on that. So I don't think I'll go to the seminary in 9th grade. So I look forward to the youth club where they had in our parish, boys and girls were in the Catholic Youth Club, CYA, Catholic Youth
America?
Of America, maybe Catholic Youth, or maybe a CYO, Catholic Youth Organization. At any rate, I joined that and went to meetings and stuff in our parish hall, and we had dances there. And, I liked that. They also put on some plays. I never was able to either try out for plays or anyway, I wasn't. But I remember liking a girl who was in the play, a very, very popular girl, Raylene Nanny was her name. And so I look forward to dancing with her and stuff. And then there was another girl that was the daughter of our scoutmaster. She was very pretty. And so when I was in high school at De La Salle Boys High School, I invited her to a dance. I was probably a sophomore by then, and she accepted my invitation, and so I went to her home, walked to her home, and walked her to the high school, and we had the dance. And I remember I was dancing with her, and I thought, this is nice. I really enjoy this, and I really like her. But this isn't enough to, change my life so that I wouldn't go to the seminary. And I had got to put that off and put it off for 2 years. And after my mom died, I think in August, I decided, you know what? Girls are nice and this is great, but I think I can do without them and go to the seminary. So I contacted the seminary and I took the exams and so on that they had for people that would be entering the seminary later, which is past 9th grade. And so I got the call from the priest, and he said, well, you passed all the tests and everything, and you'd be acceptable in seminary, but we're thinking that it'd be best for you to wait and go after high school. Start in college. What do you think about that? I told him, I said, I'm willing to go now, and but if I wait till after high school, I'll be married by then, and or wanting to get married by then, And so he said, "Okay, you can come now." That was a very bad mistake, but it turned out good for me because I really enjoyed my life in the seminary. I enjoyed teaching other seminarians things that I knew just from my family about our relationship with God. For example, my mother had introduced us, the whole family, to the Catholic worker movement, which is started by Dorothy Day, and a woman who had been a communist younger in her life, and then she decided that communism really didn't offer the real answer to poverty and all these problems that they said they were going to help with. And she decided that Catholicism, Christianity, was really the answer, and she became a Catholic. So she started the Catholic Worker, which was, she started the newspaper, was editor of it, and the communists had a newspaper called The Worker, and the communists were talking about integration, and they were talking about social justice, and they were talking about peace and all those things, and she dealt with these at a much deeper level, from a spiritual level. And so I was exposed to her through my mom, who really followed Dorothy Day's interests and the newspaper, The Catholic Worker. And so I learned about that, and I shared that with my classmates. They had never heard of it. And also the Catholic Worker, and there was another group that was working for interracial justice. Can't remember the name now. Since the stroke, I don't remember a lot of things. At any rate, we learned about that movement and for interracial justice. And so I shared these things with my classmates. They had never heard of this stuff. And so I felt that the seminary was not only a place where I learned, it was also a place where I was able to share some faith issues and faith dimensions that my classmates had never heard of. And my brother Paul had gotten involved in the charismatic renewal and was also in the liturgical renewal. And so we learned about Advent wreaths, where you'd have 4 candles in a wreath, and you'd light the candles one for each of the 4 Sundays of Advent, and sing Advent songs and pray Advent prayers, preparing us for the birth of Christ. And so they had never heard about that at the seminary, so I was able to get an Advent wreath going, and we prayed Advent prayers, and the faculty of the seminary supported us doing that. And so I introduced things to the seminary that they had never heard of, all stuff that I had learned from my family. So seminary life was a two-way street. I was learning about the scriptures, and I was learning about theology, and I was teaching about the various things I had learned from my family about the Catholic life. And so it was great experience.
So going from your time there, I wanted to know what made you leave being a priest.
Okay. Well, I was a priest for 10 years, and I really enjoyed the work of the priesthood. I enjoyed teaching people, enjoyed preaching, enjoyed working with the Spanish-speaking people. I was placed in parishes where there were Spanish-speaking people, and I would even work in other parishes because the priests there didn't speak Spanish. So I really enjoyed that a lot. I enjoyed every aspect of the priesthood. I really did. So if I loved it so much, why am I not active in the priesthood? Well, I met a fellow who worked in the local taught in the local high school, and he told me that he was a charismatic Pentecostal person, and he was a teacher in school, and he told me that he would like me to go with him to listen to a priest who taught at Notre Dame, who had been baptized in the Holy Spirit and was seeing lots of students at Notre Dame, which is a Catholic university, being baptized in the Holy Spirit and having all kind of wonderful experiences and praying in tongues. And I thought, wow, that's really interesting. I'd like to meet. And he said, well, he's going to be speaking at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Why don't you go with me? He said, and we'll listen to him. And I said, oh, that'd be great. And I checked my schedule, and I was committed to something in the parish. Couldn't do it. Couldn't leave. So I missed that opportunity, but I cultivated a friendship with this young man, and he told me one time that we were talking. He said, you know, when school's out, I take 2 days to pray and fast, and before I begin grading papers and giving their final grades. And he said, I'm going to be doing it these next 2 days, and he told me when. And I said, he said, would you like to come and join me for prayer? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I have some commitments during the day, but I could go in the evening. He said, I pray all night long for these 2 days. And so I said, I could come and pray with you all day long, you know, this particular day, and come after I finish my work in the parish. So he said, yeah, that'd be fine. Come and join me. He was in the next town north of me. So so I went to pray with him. And he had a little, very small congregation of maybe a dozen people who met for prayer every day, I don't know how many days a week, and on Sundays to pray and worship God together. And they had bought an old schoolhouse that had been abandoned, and they bought that and converted it into their little church. So I went, well, let me tell you something that happened before spending the night in prayer with him. I had visited their church one time, and, you know, Roman collar and black suit and the whole thing. And they welcomed me at their prayer service, and I was impressed that they would be saying, praise God, thank you, Jesus, over and over, and just really, really focused on talking to God and praising God. And so at the end they asked me, they also would pray in tongues, and sometimes someone would interpret what was said in tongues and explain it to the congregation, and that was impressive. It reminded me of the early church when that was a common thing for people to speak in tongues and pray as they did. So at the end, after they finished their service, they said, well, Father, what do you think? How do you feel about what we're doing? And I said, well, I was really impressed with your dedication to the Lord. And I said, but you know, when you tell God that you love him and you thank Jesus for everything, it seems like that brings with it a responsibility to people, because God's concerned about people. And they said, well, we are. And I said, well, I got a call today from a man. He said he's a I can't remember the church he's in, but he said there's our ministry in this church is to minister to the poor, but there's none of those churches in this town. Again, my memory since the stroke, I can't remember the name of the church. So he said, since there's no church in this town, I try to do the ministry of the church, even though I can't attend a service at the church. And so the police or sheriff told me that this family, they found living in a wooded area. It's a woman with 5 children, and they're sleeping outside. They had no place to live. They were coming up from Detroit, and didn't have any particular place they wanted to go. They just wanted to leave the city, and and so they don't have any place. You know, they're living in a wooded area, and so they need to be able to sleep in bed someplace. And so this guy said, well, yeah, that's our ministry. So he rented a motel, put them up in the motel so they could all sleep in beds or something. And but he said, I need something more permanent for them. And so he called me and said, I understand that you care about poor people. So what can you do for them? And so I said to this little congregation, what can you do for these people? It's a black woman with her 5 kids. She's has been living in the woods, and now this man has put him up in a hotel, but he can't do that for very long. What can you do for them? You know, and you've been saying that you love Jesus. Well, Jesus tells us, I was hungry and you gave me to eat. I was homeless and you took me in. What are we going to do for these people? And they said, well, we could bring them here in our little church, this little schoolhouse that we converted to a church. We could bring them here, and we can get mattresses for them, and they can all sleep, and we'll keep them, take care of them, make sure they have food. I said, wonderful. That's exactly the Jesus response that we need to have as Christians. So sure enough, they took them in, and they lived there, and they were in the process of buying another little schoolhouse and converting it for a home for them. And I was just very impressed. I said, these are real Christians, you know. I knew that if I would have brought that same problem, well, I thought I knew that if I brought the same problem to my congregation of Catholics in the town of Capac, they would have said, well, we can't do anything for them. You know, we've all got our responsibilities at home, and what could we do? But these people said, yes, bring them here. So they brought them to their little church, and they made it a place for them to live. And I don't know how many weeks they were living with them, and they were ready to get them established in school and everything. And then one day they just all disappeared, and they couldn't find them anywhere. So the woman may have had some very serious mental problems, wasn't used to people caring about her and her kids, not used to them taking charge and making things happen for them. And so they just left. That I don't know if that was after a month or how many weeks it was. It's long ago, so I've forgotten. But this is the gentleman, the one that was pastoring this group. He was a school teacher. So anyway, he was going to be praying all night and all day for 2 days before he graded his papers, and so he invited me to come and join him. So there I was with him, maybe 10 o'clock at night we started, and we prayed and we sang and we maybe even napped a little bit, but we had a long conversation and about his life and how he happened to pastor a church. And he told me that when he came out of the army, he had been a Christian for some years, I think. And he said he started praying for a wife. He said, I'm ready to settle down now and finish college, and I'm going to be teaching in a school. So he asked the Lord to give him a wife. And he met this wonderful woman that shared his faith and was willing to share his ministry to everyone that he ministered to, and so they spent some time together, and eventually they got married. And I said to him, you know, that's what I should do. I should pray for a wife, because I know that if God sends me a wife, then that'll be a good thing. And if he doesn't want me to be married because I made a vow of celibacy and he wants me to follow that, then he won't send me a wife. So I told him, and I started praying right then for a wife, that God would send me a wife. So life goes on, and we had a good time praying all through the night that night, and then I got a call, after Mass, a young girl, about 14, said, Father, I want to talk to you. And her eyes were just glowing, and I thought, oh gosh, I hope she's not wanting to get married. She looks like she might want to be. Oh man, those are hard situations, because it's hard to talk someone out of getting married who thinks they're madly in love. So anyway, I said, yeah, stick around and we'll talk soon as I get finished greeting, talking to people as they're leaving Mass. So this was on a Sunday. And so after everyone had gone on, I'm saying, Lord, please help me with this. This is going to be a tough one if she wants to get married. So I took her back to my office, and she said, Father, I met the Lord, and do you know where there's a charismatic Catholic group that I can join? Because I've been baptized in the Holy Spirit. And that's why your eyes were so glowing. And I thought, wow, am I happy. You're not talking about getting married or anything like that. That would be totally out of the picture. So I said, well, there's a charismatic renewal Catholic group at the University of Michigan, and that's in Ann Arbor, and that's 100 miles away to the south. And then there's one at Fresno State. At Michigan State University, and that's 100 miles to the west. So they're pretty far apart, pretty far away. You know what? I had already been to Ann Arbor, where there was a charismatic prayer group, and my brother Paul had introduced me to them, and I was baptized in the Holy Spirit there. So I said, why don't we start a charismatic prayer group here in Capac? She said, oh, wonderful. She said, I have a neighbor, a woman that's really filled with the Spirit and is a wonderful woman, and she would help us. So she said, can I bring her? And I said, sure. So we set up an appointment for the next Saturday night, that we would have a charismatic prayer meeting in the church, in the little office building, office room in the church building. So she brought her friend, and then I contacted a couple of men, Mexican guys that I knew, who had gone through the Cursillo, where they were exposed to intensive weekend about prayer and the Holy Spirit and so on. So I thought, well, they would be good. So a couple of guys came from that group, and so they joined us, and then she brought her neighbor that was educating her about the Holy Spirit. Well, her neighbor's name is Eileen, and she was a very, I would say, how old? Maybe in her early 30s. And she came with her. She's a very beautiful blonde woman. And so she was there, and we talked and we prayed and we met with this group. And a funny thing happened. She sat in this rocking chair, and we all sat in different chairs. And every time she would rock, there was one of the sides of it was kind of short, and every time she would rock, the rocking chair would move right over to where I was, and she'd be kind of blushing and embarrassed, and she'd get up and move the chair back, and then she'd rock, a little bit nervous. You know, she was not a Catholic, and here she is in this Catholic church with all these Catholic people, and so she's probably a little nervous. And so she'd rock it in this chair, and she'd be right up next to me. And then she'd get up, embarrassed, and move the chair apart. So that happened 2 times, or maybe 3 even. And that just was a funny part of our first meeting. So meanwhile, while we're having our prayer meeting, next door in the cafeteria, or the large room of the hall, I guess you could say, of the church, which is attached to the church building, the migrants are having their a weekly meeting and kind of socializing. So they come from a couple of camps, migrant camps, and they gather there and they socialize. Well, they're talking real loud and everything, and so it's kind of distracting to our prayer meeting. So after a couple of Saturday nights like this, I suggested, maybe we should move to someone's home. Now, I was familiar with the fact that Pentecostal meetings would frequently be in homes. And I thought one of the guys that was, one of the Catholic guys that was invited would offer his home. He didn't. Nobody did. And then this new person that was invited, the neighbor to the girl in our church, she offered her home. And so no one else offered, so okay, let's meet there. So we planned to meet there the following week. I'm not sure what day of the week it was. But none of the Catholics came because she was a Protestant, and in this town, Protestants and Catholics didn't do things much together. So here we have this meeting. This girl from my parish is there. None of the men that had made the cortillo were there. And this new person, Eileen, offered her home. We met at her home. And her mother came. So that was the prayer meeting. The girl had started it, and this new woman and her mother. So we had a prayer meeting, and then we had one the following week, and we kept meeting in her home. Well, meanwhile, I started really getting to know this young lady, Eileen, and I decided I would go with her to some of the charismatic meetings at Michigan State University, where they had a Newman Center, and they had charismatic meetings. So we went there to a meeting, And I was getting to know her as we drove and everything. And sure enough, I became very attracted to her. So that opened up a whole new, here I am praying for a wife. And then this woman comes in to my life as sharing in the prayer meetings. So then she begins working in, I invite her to come to the migrant camps where the migrants live, and we have prayer services there and Bible studies, and she comes and she brings her guitar and sings and contributes great to the ministry to the migrant camps. So the relationship with Eileen puts me in a situation that I have to struggle with. Is the Lord opening the door for me to have a marriage and a family? She had 3 children. Or is this not what's happening here? So I prayed about it. And I remembered from my Pentecostal friends, they taught me about a system of finding out God's will. It goes like this. In the book of one of the books of the Bible, I can't remember what it's called. There was a situation where a man felt called by God to lead his people against the intruding tribesmen of another culture that were against their religion. And so they had to defend themselves. And the man said, I'll do this, God, if you want it, but I can't be sure you want it, so I'm going to put this to the test. So he said, I'll put a sheepskin on the threshing floor in the building where we thresh wheat. And if in the morning there's dew on the sheepskin, but not any place else on the threshing floor, I'll know that you want me to lead your people against these intruding pagans that are trying to take our religion away. So the next morning he puts the sheepskin out. Next morning there's dew on the sheepskin, but no moisture on the floor of the threshing. Oh. So he says, well, Lord, I want to really make sure this is you. So tonight I'll put the sheepskin out again, and if there's moisture, dew on the floor around it, but not on the sheepskin, then I'll know that this is you, that you want me to do this, lead your people. So the next morning, guess what? There's moisture all around it, but not on the sheepskin. So he says, oh Lord, I really want to make sure of this. So I'm going to do this one more time. And if you show me again and give me another sign, then I'll lead the people against these intruders. So sure enough, the next morning, there's dew on the sheepskin again, but not on the floor all around. So he says, okay, and he leads the people, and they drive out the intruders that are against the religion. So people have told me, this is what you got to do. You got to figure out something that God will do to show that it's his will. So I say, okay, I know this man, Irv Cott, he's got 8 kids, all boys, and he's a real committed Christian, and he's active in the Cursillo movement, and he's a elite reader at church. He loves you, Lord, and I know that. So I go to Irv and I say, I'm thinking about getting married, but I don't want to do it if it's not God's will. And so I'm asking you, what do you think? And he said, Joe, I don't think God cares whether you get married or not. What he cares about is that you're committed to him and follow him. That's what counts. So whether you get married or not, he doesn't really care. Oh, wow, that's interesting. So I thought, I'm going to check this another way. So I was going to start a Bible study in a town that's near here, near Fresno. It's called Cutler Orosi. It's a farm worker town, and the church there has a pastor that's from Mexico, Father Neri, and Father Neri, I'm going to ask about starting a Bible study in his area in Spanish for migrant workers, because he has a lot of farm workers in that area. So, okay, so as I'm ringing the doorbell, I say, Lord, Father Neri doesn't know me from Adam, so I'm going to ask him, I'm going to tell him what I'm thinking about getting married and see what he thinks. That's another fleece I'm putting out here. So he welcomed me in, he's glad to meet me and so on. So I said, yeah, you can do a Bible study here, and that's no problem. So I said, Father Neri, before I leave, I want to ask you a question. I've been thinking about the possibility of getting married, but I'm not sure if it's God's will. And he almost jumped out of his chair. He said, that's wonderful. He said, if I was younger, I would get married too. Now there's not another priest in this whole diocese that would say that. Okay, Lord, that's from you. But I want to really be sure about this, because this is important. I mean, I committed to celibacy when I was a young man, and I made it as a solemn promise to you, and it was verified by the bishop and by the whole congregation, everybody. All my family knows about that commitment I made. So I'm going to try one more fleece, and here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to open the Bible, and I'm going to put my finger on a verse without looking at it. Then I'm going to read the verse. And if that verse supports me getting married, then I'll figure, well, I have your blessing. But if it doesn't, then I'll figure, well, I guess maybe this isn't a good idea. So open the Bible and put it on a verse. And I can't tell you the verse number right now. It's in the book of Proverbs. But the verse said, he who marries a wife receives a blessing from the Lord. Now that's not in there 3 times in the Bible. It's in there once. And if the whole Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, that's where I put my finger. Lord, I think that's what you're telling me. So I'm going to go ahead. And so next time I met with a group of priests. We had a retreat. This is on our own, group of priests from this area. One of them was Father Ed. You maybe know Father Ed, friend of Jeannie Rose up in the mountains. Anyway, and a friend of mine. So there's a number of priests, and I told them I'm thinking of getting married, and it looks like this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to go back to Michigan, and I'm going to ask her if she wants to marry me. And then we go back to Michigan. Peter, you met Peter here last time. Peter was planning to get married, and he wanted me to marry him. And he said, "You could marry him at their home," and I said, "Sure, I can do that." So I did, and then I proposed to Eileen, and she said, "Let me think about it." And so she did for a day or so, and then she said yes, she would marry me. So then I called Cesar Chavez and said, "Well, I told you I was thinking about it, so I'm going to get married, and I'll continue working as a chaplain for the Farm Workers Union." And he said, "Well, wait a minute, I don't think you can do that because the bishops are supporting the boycott of grapes, which is the way we're working to get all our farm workers into the union, and they won't support that. That's a big support from all the bishops around the country. So I can't risk that. So you can work as a organizer for the union, but you can't be chaplain anymore." So then I said, "Oh boy, I'm gonna have to think about this one." So I talked with Eileen, and I said, "I think I need to go there and figure out some way I can support us." I couldn't find any kind of work that I could get in the Michigan area. So I said, I'll go there and see if I can get work, and so we can get married. So she agreed to that. So I came out here and tried to find work, and only work I could find is picking watermelons, picking grapes, and so I was working as a farm worker for about a year or so, and then I was at a picket line before I started working, picking grapes in another ranch, and on this picket line, Dolores Huerta came up to me. Now Dolores is on the board of the Farm Workers Union, and she said that there was a person who needed some counseling, and would I be willing to counsel her? And I said, "Well, yeah, I would, but since I'm planning to get married, I won't be a priest anymore, so my counseling, I think I need to get some other credential, and if I go to school and get a license as a marriage and family counselor, then I can do counseling." So she said, "Well, this is an immediate need right now." And I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, if the union will support me going back to college and getting this license, then I can start counseling now as a student working towards getting a license." So she worked it out with the union, and they agreed to pay my salary, which was $5 a month. No, $10 a month plus room and board. So I started going to school and counseling at the Farm Workers Clinic.
Here, I think we should stop it right here.
Okay,
Um,
have we stopped already?
I'm still going on this one.
Okay. So anyway, I married Eileen, and I went to college and got a master's degree in psychology, and worked for the union as a counselor.